Hey everybody, I'm Eboni K. Williams along with Eric Bolling and Kat Timpf. We are the Fox News specialists. Congress just face plants on repealing and replacing Obamacare, despite promise after promise that they would get it done. Senate Republicans are coming up empty-handed to their vow to voters. The Senate repeal and replace bill died last night after 2 more GOP defections. And today, Senate Republicans starting to move for a straight Obamacare repeal vote, but 3 Republican senators already announcing they would not vote for a straight repeal, effectively killing any chance of any health care bill going forward, at least for now. Now, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is indicating that he wants to still hold a vote on straight Obamacare repeal this week, even knowing that it might fail. President Trump responding to the collapse in Congress this afternoon.
Let Obamacare fail, it'll be a lot easier. And I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it. We'll let Obamacare fail, and then the Democrats are going to come to us and they're going to say, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? Or how do we come up with a new plan? So we'll see what happens.
Okay, Eric, I see where the president is going with this, and it sounds a lot like some of the advice you've recommended for him. But that's different than what we heard from Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the press conference. I heard a lot of obstruction and obstruction and obstruction. I got to tell you, Eric, I wasn't impressed with that obstruction argument from President Obama. When you're the leader of the free world, it's your job to work around obstruction.
Okay, I'll give you that. Here, look, you're right. We've been saying this, at least on this show, we've been saying this. They need to repeal this Obamacare beast right now. I in agreement that this is not the right time to replace it because we don't have a good replacement for it. It needs to be repealed. Now, or forever be on record saying that you voted against repealing Obamacare. Now, you put up the full screen of those 3 senators. Let's talk about that very quickly. Shelley Capito, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. 2 of the 3 of them voted to repeal it 18 months ago. Now all of a sudden they're saying they're not going to. I will tell you, they will get primaried. All 3 of those will be primaried. 2020 for Capito and Collins and Lisa Murkowski in 2024. They will get primaried if they vote against repealing Obamacare. And that's the bottom line is they'll probably lose their seats too.
Kat, though, the repeal without a replacement, is that just a political statement at that point?
Well, I think that it would be at this point because they know that they don't have the votes for it, but I still think that they should do it. I agree with Eric. I think that they said that they were going to repeal it, and they need to repeal it.
That's a need to replace it, maybe sometime down the future. We'll meet today's specialist now. She's a columnist for the Washington Times, a former White House spokeswoman for President George W. Bush, and a radio host with her husband Matt on Sirius XM's Patriot Station. And she specializes in cooking big Cuban meals. Mercedes Schlapp is here. And he was a speaker at the 2016 Republican National Convention. He's also a frequent guest on the Fox News channel, and he's the chairman of GOPAC, but he specializes in being a good listener. What a great quality, because that's how he gets all his info. David Avella is here with us again. So Mercedes, I was kind of discussing with both Eric and Kat around, I get the notion of repealing Obamacare. I have been one of the staunchest critics of these sky-high premiums that hurt all Americans, but I was hopeful for a replacement. Where do you see the GOP going on that issue?
Well, I think there's a huge sense of frustration, obviously, coming out of Congress, not being able to bring both moderates and conservatives to the table to get the job done. This is why Republicans were voted in. There was a clear mandate of repealing and replacing Obamacare. Why? Because when you look at the fact that there is a destabilization in our individual insurance markets, that's troubling. When you have the fact that you're still seeing premiums continue to rise, I mean, a family of 4 next year will have to, it'll increase to 40% in terms of what their health care costs will be in many cases. I mean, Eboni, it is troubling. And the mere fact that the Republicans cannot come to that middle ground where you see this division amongst the moderates and the conservatives, I think that it's just a disservice for the American people. They're not fulfilling their promise.
Yeah, and David, I'm hearing from the president and also really from the GOP in its totality, a lot of criticisms around the Dems and them not getting on board and not being a part of this. And I think that's fair and that's accurate. But my goodness, first things first, right? Before you're asking for Dems to get on board, doesn't the GOP have to get on the same page with this?
At some point, Republicans and Democrats are going to have to go home to their constituents and explain when they said last year during an election that we're going to repeal and replace or reform, if you were a Democrat, Obamacare, what they thought that meant. And so much of this discussion and why it is a disservice to the American people is all about how many people the government's going to pay for in giving them Medicare. And it says nothing about the fact that there are doctors every day not accepting new Medicare patients. So what happens to those Medicare patients? They don't continue to get coverage. And we haven't talked about the things that really need to start happening in healthcare reform. We need innovation. We need consumer predictability and freedom for them to pick the plans they want. We need states, not the federal government, running the insurance markets. We don't allow states to sell insurance policies across state lines. So how about letting states actually dictate what their policies are going to be?
Why didn't they put that in, though, David?
Right.
Why didn't the Republicans put this in?
I'll tell you why, because under budget reconciliation, you can't do that. That is new legislation.
But Mercy,
that would
now,
have
come
to
on,
require...
Mercy, you and I are good friends. We know you can go ahead and
what I'm telling you, I'm telling you about
nuclear.
The constraints of the legislative process.
They can go nuclear.
You really want to go nuclear.
Yes.
If the Democrats win the House or the Senate, in the Senate, you don't want to go nuclear. I think that is a bad move for the Senate to go
nuclear, because we're going to end up with this. We're going to end up with maybe no repeal and no replace. And if they had just gone nuclear on this, this is what they could have done. They could have added the things like competition across state lines.
It would forever change historically how the Senate would be run.
Of course, who cares?
I care.
But they're willing to do it on Supreme Court nominations, no, Mercedes.
No, this is not constitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that prohibits going nuclear on this. They're turning the Senate body into a similar simple majority on this. Look, elections have consequences.
No,
we put them there.
They do, and the Democrats would probably decide to go nuclear because they did in the past. Obviously,
they have in the past.
Senator Reid did.
There's precedent for it. I was going to say that's one of the things, David, when you're talking about going across state lines, everybody has talked about it. When given the opportunity, I'm very surprised and disappointed that the GOP didn't take that opportunity. I agree with Eric on this. I think the consequences would have been far less than what the rewards would have been had that been at place.
Here's next steps. Next steps ought to be starting to move forward on these things and putting pressure on the 8 Democrats who are up next year in states that President Obama easily won. So Joe Manchin, Joe Donnelly, getting pressure on them, adding them to the 52 Republicans to get us to 60% on things that people can agree on.
Okay, but I agree with Eboni that although you can blame some of this on Democrats, I guess fine, but look at the Republicans have control of the House and the Senate, and the president is a Republican. Could you imagine if any other entity in the entire universe ran the way that Congress is running? Imagine if you had a mechanic shop where they just tell you that your car's broken and you drop it off and they say, well, we don't know how to fix it, but it's definitely super broken and we know that. You go to pick it up, everyone's screaming about how to fix it. A doctor that just tells you you're sick but doesn't know how to make you better. I mean, could you imagine anybody else getting away with it? It's absolutely insane. They've had 7 years here.
Well, let me just give you a very simple way to get this done. Look, you get these 3 senators, or get one of the Democrat senators who are up, who ran again, who lost, who won, but Trump won in the states. No, West Virginia.
That's right.
Right? West Virginia, Trump won by 40 points. Now you have a senator there that's going to run in a Democrat who should come over. Here's all you have to do: repeal. Right? Repeal now. Get the repeal underway, and then go to these Democrat senators going, look, you're up for re-election in a state that Trump holds. You're going to lose your seat unless you vote along the lines of what the Republicans put forward as a replacement.
Which is where President Trump is at and where Mitch McConnell is, where I think they're saying it's less about time and more about the quality of the reform. So they're willing to say, let's move on repeal and then take the 2 years to have the hearings and to get to that point. However, the American people cannot wait any longer. We need significant changes now, Eric. I think that if they keep postponing it, and I mean, they've had 8 years to think through what has to get done. We need to have significant entitlement reform, especially in the area of Medicaid. We need to move it back to the states. And that's
repealing alone, Mercedes, without a replacement, I don't think satisfies what you're demanding, which I think is what the American people want and what they mandated in this election. Eric, let me go back to what you just said, though. You talk about ways to fix this in terms of votes. I think it would probably work. But what if instead of talking about the need to get more votes to get it passed, we actually improved the policy itself, and then the votes would take care of themselves?
Exactly what you're talking about. 4 things that conservatives complained about Obamacare: competition across state lines, drug pricing. Why is it you can produce a drug in America and it's cheaper to buy in Canada? Drug pricing, tort reform, and hospital pricing transparency. Those are 4 things we said Obamacare didn't have, but guess what? Neither did the GOP replacement bill. That's a problem. Now, Mercy, this is where I'm going to push back.
I love it how I talk to you about Mercy. Don't talk to McConnell.
Because the only way you're going to get those things in there is by using the nuclear option. And guess what? That becomes a bill that becomes good for the American people instead of a bill that for a vast majority of people who are using Obamacare, it's going to be a higher premium if it stayed the way they're trying to sell it to us.
Yeah, I mean, will Mitch McConnell move towards the nuclear option? It's unlikely, but in this sort of congressional cycle that we've seen, anything is possible. Yeah. At least what we're seeing.
Can I just say what I see here is what Eric's talking about is a risk, and I understand that when you're talking politics of this stake and this magnitude, those risks feel nerve-wracking, but I think it's a risk that would pay off.
I do think that there is a lack of boldness coming from the Republican side in the sense that you had the 2015 repeal, 48 Republicans supporting the repeal, and now several
it was easy
Republicans
then. It was easy then. There were no
backing away
because they knew Obama would veto.
So it was a grandstand vote as opposed to now it's high risk. It's time to make that move by the Republicans. And I'm disappointed, quite frankly. I wish they can get to a point from a conservative and moderate side where they can agree. But the conservatives say it doesn't go far enough. The moderates say it goes too far.
Can we at least acknowledge that it's Paul Ryan and the House leadership?
They got it done. They got it done.
Got what done? They couldn't even pass
their bill. They took the risk.
They had to
it was ugly. It was horrible. They watered it down.
And Mitch McConnell and the Senate leadership side that they presented two bills that they just can't even get through. Don't forget, the Senate bill's got to go back to the House. Donald Trump is 100% right. They failed the American people.
Sorry,
leadership
but
on both
not
sides
in the voters' mind. It will not be. It will be the Republicans who failed.
It's easy to blame congressional Republicans, but let me say this. We are a party that believes in the states running things. We ought to be for repeal as a governing philosophy. We ought to be basing our success on what laws we repeal, not what laws we pass. And under that scenario, we ought to be having state after state send legislation and waivers to Tom Price at HHS and allow him to do, let him allow them to do waivers.
That's not what we're seeing, and that sounds great.
This didn't pass, and so now we have an opportunity to move in that direction.
Look, if we're going to debate this,
it's not over yet.
I mean, this can yes, there are three who say they're not going to, and John McCain may be on a train coming this way. Who knows? But they do, if they get two of these people to change their minds and sign on to this, it can still be repealed and do exactly what you said. Go to state by state and get waivers from Obamacare, from whatever infrastructure is left of Obamacare, and then guess what?
We can do that now.
Then you've got 2 years to fix it. No, you can't do it now because it's still Obamacare.
You could get states can get waivers.
Obamacare, though.
The HHS secretary has a lot of
Price
power.
has pushed through about 12 of these regulations, the things that we never saw those waivers come to fruition under President Obama. But yeah, Secretary Tom Price did.
That's better. So
I don't know
Obamacare in place.
No, I think that is the wrong approach. I believe that action is needed now in terms of repealing and replacing Obamacare. It's clear it is not a perfect bill, but it does allow for entitlement reform. It does stabilize the insurance market, the individual insurance market, which is two of the areas that need to be fixed.
Everyone keeps talking about getting more GOP members, the GOP in Congress, more Republicans in Congress. I think about it. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what being a member of the GOP or being a Republican even means. When you look at a bill like this, you always think things like small government. That's not a small government bill. The House bill wasn't a small government bill.
We inherited a mess with Obamacare, and you have to decide whether you're going to put a Band-Aid on it.
Come on, Mercedes. I adore you dearly as well, but that language is not going to fly at this point, Mercedes. GOP controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. They had 7 years to get behind a conservative health care plan that brings down premiums, right? And that's not what we're seeing in either the House or the Senate bill. That's just very simple.
And if they're too big of a mess to do so, they should have said so instead of getting people to vote for them on something that they can't seem to do.
There's a process called amendments, and one of the amendments that could work is a Cruz-Lee amendment, which what would it do would allow for the insurance companies to come up with their plans that actually don't have to fit the Obamacare situation, but that gets tricky with individuals that have to deal with the pre-existing conditions.
Tricky.
It also allows for health savings accounts in this amendment, which would be a conservative amendment to be used to lower the premiums.
Something that is already basically that ship has sailed.
Yeah, you're right. It's
so let's talk about something that hasn't sailed yet.
Should we plan the funeral service?
The replacement. I mean. The repeal is not over yet. There's still an opportunity for Murkowski, Capito, or Collins to come around and say, you know what, I voted for this thing in 2015 because it's politically expedient for me to do it. Now, when the chips are on the table, I have to get back to the table and do what I did before.
And better be ready.
Then you have 2 years to fix Obamacare without it being Obamacare.
And better be ready, though, Eric, to really roll up the sleeves and do real work on the fixing, because I got to tell you, it can look like a scapegoat, cop out, easy way out to repeal with no real replacement.
Don't come up 2 years from now now and go, oops, we didn't do anything
Yeah, we've
about
been
it.
twiddling our thumbs
Too
for
late
2 years
from a
like we did the
political
last
standpoint.
7 years. Straight ahead, though, top Obama officials preparing to face congressional investigators over unmasking. And the number of officials under scrutiny might be growing. Stay with us.
Amid the hysteria around Donald Trump Jr.'s Russia controversy, the probe into unmasking by Obama administration officials around the 2016 election is very much heating up. Fox News is now confirming that Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, has agreed to testify before the House Intel Committee at a date TBD, to be determined. Among other top Obama officials appearing behind closed doors on Capitol Hill this week over unmasking and the Russia probe, former National Security Advisor Susan Rice is now slated to speak with the Senate Intel Committee. I'm going to go to you, Eboni, because I'm trying to figure out why the delays, why they're finally agreeing, and why in the world are they doing this behind closed doors?
I'm going to start with that one, Eric. Many people wanting to see them, just like we've seen Comey and several others recently, out in front of the viewing public. But I think if the goal, Eric, is to get the most information and the most powerful and palpable information behind closed doors is the only chance. Honestly, if they were in front of the American people, you're not going to get anything. Zilch, zada, nada from Power or Susan Rice.
And Kat, on March 22nd, Devin Nunes, who was running the House Intel Committee, said that Trump aides may have been inappropriately unmasked. Trump also said Susan Rice may have broken the law by unmasking, and that really is the issue here. It's the unmasking inappropriately of General Flynn that we're talking about.
For me, there are two issues here. One is potentially, yes, that it was inappropriate. I think that she acted in a politically motivated way. I think all you have to do is look at her past to know that. However, I also know, which is something that Eboni brings up all the time, that the standard is so broad that it's a very easy cover for you to do something politically motivated. So I think there's another issue, which is we need to look at what those standards are. I know that Senator Paul has said that if you are going to be unmasking a politician or a candidate, you should have to go to a judge and sign off for that, which would be a great way to prevent these kind of politically motivated actions.
Marcy, why in the world would Susan Rice think that it was important to unmask General Flynn when the NSA, the FBI, and the CIA had done their due diligence and didn't think they needed to unmask?
Well, that's exactly the underlying question. Was there a political motivation behind this of Susan Rice unmasking Michael Flynn? But the person to watch here is Samantha Power. And it's because when you're looking, my information is that the intelligence reports are basically very telling. While we might not get a lot from these closed-door meetings, they're going to use a lot of vague, lawyerly terms, I think you're going to see that it's in this intelligence reports that that's where they're going to find a lot of this information, Eric.
Why, you think they emailed someone and said, hey, look what I got here?
I think that the Intelligence Committee will have that information, and the person to watch there is Samantha Power.
David, some of the other news that broke this afternoon was that Senator Feinstein said that she had spoken to Special Counsel Robert Mueller and that he was okay with Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort testifying in an open hearing.
Yeah, it will be interesting and insightful. But I must say, when all this news came out, President Obama must have went, oh my gosh, every time she says something, she raises more questions than answers questions. And as you think about, watch any Sunday show she was on, she raised far more questions about the actions that happened in that White House, who knew about what was going on. And in a White House that was as politically motivated as that White House was, to think that she was the only person that knew about these unmasking, it requires a suspension of reality.
No, David, what I'm saying is I completely agree with the end of your analysis. He's not pounding his head talking about, oh my gosh. He's talking about, he would probably be thinking, this is exactly how we planned it. Susan Rice is very well positioned, probably along with Loretta Lynch, to be the best placed fall women for the Obama White House, because they are put in a position to where a lot of the questions and unanswered questions and sketchiness and politically motivated things that for sure came out of the Obama White House fall on them, and the consequences they have at this point are going to be very small.
So, Eboni, you're saying ultimately they're counting on these ladies not to tell the truth.
They're not. Wow,
David, not giving exactly all the information
right. They're not going to give all the information out. They will go to their graves knowing many of the secrets kept by the Obama administration, and that's, I think, how it's designed.
there's two other points here that we need to look at. One is who, for example, Susan Rice possibly shared this information with. You're only supposed to have that intelligence information for yourself. Did it go further into other officials in the Obama?
That would make it possibly a leak.
If that's correct.
Possibly.
The second question is going back to the leaks of the press.
It had to leak because it got out.
Exactly. So that goes back to the leaks to the press.
But do we know that Susan Rice? Can we prove?
We can't prove. I mean, we
Susan
can't.
Rice
That's
yeah.
we don't know the answer to that question. But that is the fundamental question of this unmasking, which is how did these leaks get to the press and who's responsible for this?
Well, I don't know. Comey seems to like to give some stuff to the press once in a while.
Classified information.
So let's get back to this. If it wasn't politically motivated, then what in the world else would a political appointee in the White House have an issue with trying to find out the name of General Flynn as an operative of the
I agree with you, and that's why I said that I agree with you that it probably was politically motivated. The difference is you can't really prove that.
Yeah.
Can't
do
prove that.
No,
All she has to do is say that it provided some foreign intelligence value, and she's covered.
And she can also say, Eric and Kat, that she needed it for context. That's also a nice catch-all. She could say context for national security. She doesn't. If she says, well, I could understand how this possibly relates to national security.
And that's what I mean, Eric. That's what I mean when I say the standards are too broad.
And here's the deal. Sounds like something that the CIA should handle and not the National Security Council. That's exactly where it falls.
You know what else we need to understand here, and Eboni, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you go and testify on the Hill in front of Congress, you're not really liable for anything. You can lie to Congress on the Hill and correct the record later, and everyone says, okay, you corrected the record.
So you
can't do that to the FBI, as Mercy points out, but you can do it to Congress.
You sure can, and I agree. I think if you're going to testify in any open setting like that, it should be under the wager of perjury.
Eric mentioned the news that came out about Feinstein and Comey. The other news that came out today, as John Roberts on Fox said, is now we found out another person in this Eric Trump meeting. How many people were in this meeting? I mean, are we the only 5 people that weren't in this meeting? At some point, it was in the ballroom. How secretive was this meeting supposed to be?
Well, the thing that bothers me about it is that the story keeps changing on that.
I'm with Kat.
Russian real estate developer who was a friend of
Why
Russia.
just not say that he was there then?
It would have been critical for Donald Trump Jr. and the team and his lawyers basically to just be upfront. If you're already going to go out there and talk about this issue, just be upfront and share what happened in the meeting, or share the details of the meeting.
Straight ahead. President Trump slapping Iran with new sanctions, but also grudgingly recertifying Iran's compliance with the nuke deal. What that means for the U.S.-Iran clash over in the Middle East. Next.
High tensions between the U.S. and Iran taking a new turn over the last 24 hours. The Trump administration is slapping new sanctions on Iran that target its ballistic missile programs and support for terror organizations. But the administration is also reluctantly recertifying Iran's compliance with the 2015 nuke deal, while blasting Iran for violating the spirit of the agreement. The moves all come after Iran's sentencing of an American graduate student, Shiwei Wang, to 10 years in prison on dubious espionage charges. Again, this isn't new for Iran to say you were spying and sentence you to prison without that likely being the case. President Trump was very critical of the Iran deal. I understand why he can't back out of it. Do you understand, or is that something that irks you a little bit?
I'm not sure he's not going to yet. I mean, the reason why the recertification happened is it's a mandatory, there's a timeline. You have to recertify or it begins to dismantle. So they recertify, but I will guarantee you my last molecule in my body that they're talking about ways to blow this deal up and start over and get a better deal or completely walk away from the table.
That's difficult, though, Mercedes, because this isn't just us in the United States. This involves many other countries.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's what makes it so complicated. With that being said, I wish we could just withdraw from the Iranian nuclear deal. They're saying, the administration's saying that there's a comprehensive review of the U.S. policy that's towards Iran. That's what they're focused on. I think the steps that the Department of Treasury took on these sanctions are a solid step, a good first step in trying to target these entities that are involved in the ballistic programs and dealing with criminal activities. But it is surely not enough, especially when you're saying that Iran continues to violate, whether it be not allowing international inspectors to come into the country, accelerating its ballistic missile program, basically exceeding the limits on the uranium enrichment. It's very problematic, and they still, I mean, these are bad actors, and we have to do what we can to stop this deal.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Mercedes, because
Why?
I really don't. Because it's fun. I'm just kidding. I miss our old days, Mercedes, doing that every week.
Exactly.
But you know what? I don't think the sanctions are any kind of step in any direction, quite frankly, because we know the previous ones we had in place didn't work really at all. I don't think there's any thwarting Iran. As you say, they are a bad actor.
But we have the nuclear. Now we have the Iranian nuclear deal that has actually empowered them.
That's what I'm saying.
And they're still conducting. I mean, that's where we need to be. That's where we have to go, which is withdraw from this Iranian nuclear deal.
Correct.
Take this first step with these sanctions.
But I don't think that's the only place I'm disagreeing, Mercedes. I don't think the sanctions are even a first step. Maybe in the sense that we can feel. Because they literally don't work. There is no thwarting Iran's bad acting at all.
It needs to be a first step of many steps.
There you go. Thank you, David.
I know the administration. There is much discussion going on in the administration about exactly what to do. And they have their eye exactly where it needs to be, which is Iran can develop these missiles. And not that they're going to. Their leaders are smart enough to know they cannot have a battle against the U.S. and win. But what they can do is have a nuclear program that they sell to a rogue terrorist group who bring it across an unsecured border, which we currently have, and allow much destruction.
Can you answer one question for me? Tell me one thing the sanctions do.
May I?
It's a first step.
There are, and whereas sanctions didn't and won't work with North Korea, because we don't have any trade with them. Frankly, North Korea and China are the only place that it's going to work is if China puts sanctions on North Korea. Iran's different. They have 4 million barrels of production a day or so of oil. And when we embargo that oil and we say you can't trade with Iran or you're violating a sanction and we'll slap sanctions on you, it really hurts their economy. Their economy was really hurt for many, many years with these sanctions until the genius Barack Obama decided to lift the sanctions and send them $150 million.
I think what Eboni's point is that going to change their behavior, though, right?
Sanctions,
that's your point.
In Iran, it does. And I'll bring these up.
We know that they've still been developing, and that's how we know.
No, their economies were struggling with these sanctions. They were hurting the average Iranian.
But there are sanctions currently in place, correct? Yeah, of course there are.
Their people suffer, and even in we saw throughout the Middle East, people were only going to suffer for so long before they go after their own leaders. It is a first step. It's not an end step.
Well, we lifted the suffering, though.
It's really tough. It's a tough position for President Trump to be in, because if you just remove the deal, they keep the money, and then we just don't get to monitor at all anymore. And then we have all these other countries involved.
Going forward, if you put those sanctions back in place where you can't trade, or you do a massive oil embargo on Iran, that is choking their economy the way, Russia gets choked when prices go down.
Eric's right.
But we do have current sanctions, and I'm just saying they're not that effective.
Well, we have a nuclear deal in place also, which is making matters worse. So that has to be the first thing to go.
I think it's a terrible, unenforceable deal.
Right.
All right, well, looks like we're not going to solve it now. Coming up,
25 minutes.
what the head of the U.S. Border Patrol Union is touting is nothing short of miraculous. Stay tuned.
Got my chips cashed in, keep trucking, like the doo-dah man together, more or less in line, just keep trucking on.
Well, welcome back to the Fox News Specialists. Our specialists today are Mercedes Schlapp and David Avella. So let's continue the conversation. Despite the gridlock in Congress, President Trump is still scoring big successes with one of his signature issues, stopping illegal immigration. The head of the U.S. Border Patrol Union is heaping praise on the Donald. Watch.
What we've seen is nothing short of miraculous. If you look at the rhetoric that President Trump has given, it's caused the number of illegal border crossers to go down, something that we've never seen in the history of the Border Patrol. We've never seen such a drop that we currently have.
And the latest figures from immigration officials show apprehensions at the southwest border have plummeted 53% in the first 6 months of this year compared to 2016. Apprehensions are used to gauge how many people are trying to illegally cross the border. Miraculous indeed. Kat, Trump is the wall. I've said it before. Apparently the wall's not even up yet, and he's got immigration illegal down.
Let me tell you, I am all about using tough rhetoric to control the border because rhetoric is free. It costs taxpayers nothing. So I'm all about that. And I don't think it makes sense, right? When you hear the difference in the way he speaks, people listen and they get scared and they won't want to come. If they think that they can come and that they'll be fine and that we'll provide for them, then of course they're not going to be scared away from it. I think we both agree on the making legal immigration easier thing. But in terms of controlling the border, as a libertarian, that is a no government free solution, and I'm all about it.
Okay, Ebony, they're crediting this plummeting illegal immigration issue because the illegals are afraid of Donald Trump enforcing the law.
I think this is great. I totally agree with Kat. This is free rhetoric that invites people to a nice, comfy space to break our statutes and laws is something that I do not support. I don't stand for it. It's the problem I have with sanctuary cities. So, yes, I think if President Trump can be effective and have tangible decrease in this type of illegal behavior just by speaking about it, Eric, it's so good, in fact, maybe we don't need the wall.
There you go.
Well, why not? So it's down 53%. That means, you know, I know some, there's 47% to go.
That's right. That's right. First of all, you have to remember that during the summertime is when you see basically the increase of illegals coming to the United States. It was something that we saw under President Obama. I think what you're seeing here with President Trump is that there is clearly a message being sent to in Central America, South America, basically saying, the doors, you know, you got to come in. There's only one way to come in, and that's a legal way. This does not solve the problem, though, of dealing with the visa overstays. Close to over that 47% of individuals who come illegally are visa overstays. So we have a fundamental problem with our immigration system, which what we're seeing, it's bureaucratic, it's arcane. There needs to be fundamental changes made to that. And I think that that's going to be one of the areas that needs to be looked into.
David, Donald Trump has been soliciting, I guess, invitations from construction companies, engineering companies about how to build this wall. And honestly, he mentioned the solar panel wall. I've seen a couple of prototypes. It looks amazing, actually, and would pay for itself.
It does. It's the type of innovation that we need because we need 100% security that bad actors aren't coming across the border, one. Two, the president should be praised for the efforts that he's doing to make sure folks in Venezuela live in freedom, and so thus they don't feel the need to come to America. And three, he is working on the visa issue, Ebony, to make sure that the workers we need get here. All that said, let me also add, and I think it goes to a bigger picture. If you want to look at where the success in the Trump administration is coming, look at all the cabinet secretaries and the things they're doing, whether it's what Scott Pruitt's doing at EPA, Rick Perry's doing at the Department of Energy to help create jobs and get more sources of energy going, whether it's here with the border security, with what Kelly is doing. We ought to be doing segments on the Trump administration's cabinet secretaries and the success they're having.
President Trump is going to run into problems. Eric, you're going to love this. Of course, you won't be surprised that Congress will not likely want to provide funding for building the wall. They did provide, I think it was $1.6 billion in what would be some of the infrastructure in terms of for immigration. But that is where you're going to find another battle with Congress, which is that of providing.
So let's make Mexico pay for the darn wall. I still think there's ways to do that.
There's ways to do that through like remittances.
Name one way.
I got one. Right?
I got one too. I got one.
Here's why. We import 2 million barrels of oil per day and oil products from Mexico. Every day. It comes through a pipeline, right? Instead of paying them, let's say the price is $42 per barrel. Pay them $41 per barrel. You put $1 in escrow for every barrel that comes. That's $2 million per day towards that wall. Put it right towards the wall. It doesn't affect the price of oil one iota. And all it is, Mexico can't go anywhere else with that oil because it costs them too much to send it to China.
How about this, Eric? How about Al Gore, Donald Trump, solar panel wall?
I love it.
It deals with the economy, deals with immigration, deals with the environment.
I got another way. I use Mexican laborers. And pay them whatever. Use their laborers and they'll kick it in. Let Mexico pay their own laborers. There's ways.
How do you force them to do that? I think you can't.
Well, the oil way, they have no choice. Anyway, I'll leave it right there. O.J. Simpson preparing to face his parole hearing on Thursday. And now the odds of his release from prison are literally in his favor. In other words, the juice may soon be loose. Look out, ladies.
Will O.J. Simpson walk free from prison this week with his Thursday parole hearing rapidly approaching an early release for the juice is appearing more and more likely. Now, despite serving only the minimum 9 years of his 33-year prison sentence, new reports indicate that no one at Thursday's hearing is expected to oppose Simpson's release. That includes the victim of his botched Las Vegas robbery back in 2008 and the prosecutor who actually put him in prison. But there are a few things that could still trip up O.J. Mercedes, many people, this is like, wow, you know, because a lot of people, although he went to prison for the robberies, felt that this was some type of circular justice around the acquittal, of course, of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson.
But the parole, what they look for, what the judge looks for is O.J. Simpson ultimately, is he a danger to society?
In this moment.
In this moment. They also check to see what the stakeholders think, and then they also look at the biggest factor, which is age.
Yeah.
So he's 70 years old, and what they do know in terms of statistics is that you have a 40% recidivism, if I'm saying that correctly, recidivism, in terms of criminals who come out, go back into jail. If you're over the age of 70, that number of recidivism is in the single digits, so they don't feel that would be in danger.
Eric, in addition to his age, he's been like a model prisoner. They're saying OJ's leading a Baptist prayer group. He's working in the gym. I know you can't believe this. He is you'd appreciate this, former baseball player that you are, commissioner of the prison yard softball
What a
league.
stand-up man.
You know, I mean, he's just a model prisoner.
Here's my question to you, Ebony. Can Ron Goldman's family, or can Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown's family show up at this and have not have a say? I guess they don't have a say because he was acquitted on that, but can they just have a presence there? I mean, if I were them, I'd just go outside and
show up in the galley?
watch the people walk by and go, you're going to let this guy out? Look at us.
You know what, Eric? It's a public hearing, so certainly they could, you know, be present in that way. But, Kat, obviously the judge would be very leery of that because they don't want to just obviously look like they are punishing O.J. in this moment for the crimes that he was legally acquitted of, although found liable in civil court.
Right, and if you look at the crime itself, Ebony, as you said, the reason for the sentence seemed to be that people were mad about the murders, which, by the way, totally fair to be mad about that. But the botched robbery, this long for I mean, he didn't even get to really spend any time hanging out with the stuff he was trying to steal. Not that much of a robbery, so I kind of wouldn't be surprised to see him go, but a lot of people would be angry. He's not going to have much of a life after this either way.
Though.
Oh, I don't know.
Armed robbery, a botched armed robbery.
Yeah, and David, we know that he's already been released on some of the kidnapping. He's already come up on parole, technically, but the remaining years that he served were on the other two charges.
Yeah, the fascinating part of this whole story is it's proof that celebrity trumps all. How long has it been since Simpson did this? And here we are, we're still talking about it. Documentaries are being made about O.J. Simpson.
Well, I've watched
and we're
all
so
of it.
fascinated by celebrity.
You know what, David? I would push back on that. I don't think it's just the celebrity. I think I was in elementary school when this happened. I'm sure you were as well, Kat. And we were all at various stations. And I remember where I was when this verdict was read. I think it was the cultural phenomenon.
Because he was a celebrity.
No,
Ebony.
not just
out here,
because. It was much larger.
Robbery happens every day.
No, actually, Rodney King was not a celebrity, and that was gripping in much the same way. And I think it's the cultural dynamics, the celebrity, absolutely, but also the racial component, the domestic violence component, Mercedes, and all these different things coming together.
And in front of the public eye, I think that Americans would argue that O.J. was guilty. And so there is a sense of unfairness. But he went through the judicial process. It is what it is. And now is his time to go home.
I'm blown away that he's, what was his original sentence?
33 years.
Now, remember, armed robbery. Right? He had some friends come. They pulled a gun. Yeah. They held the guy. Yeah. Kidnapping.
Totally a mess.
Or what's it called? Held against your will. What's it called? It's not kidnapping. It's another technicality. Whatever. I mean, these are major crimes.
They are, Eric. But I got to tell you, from my experience, he would have never gotten 33 years as a first offender. You got to remember, criminally speaking, O.J. was a first offender, and I think he was guilty of sin. I think he probably killed Ron and Nicole. But according to the letter of the law, he was found not guilty of that. And 33 years on a first offender was a little bit much, I think, is why we're not seeing opposition from the DA, Eric, who actually prosecuted him.
He's going home.
I'm just still waiting for him to spend all that time he promised to spend looking for
the.
I'm sure he'll make it life's work.
To find the killer. When we return, we will circle back with our specialists, Mercedes Schlapp and David Avella. Stay with us.
Sit down and set some need to say sorry now. Do what do I dee da dee da doo da. Do what do da dee da do da doo da. Do what do da dee da do da.
Time to circle back with our specialists, Mercedes Schlapp and David Avella. Mercedes, my question's for you. Your mom, you have 5 kids?
Yes, 5 girls.
5 girls.
One is named Kat and the other Ebony. It's really weird.
So, as a mom having that experience, is there anything you can maybe offer Congress and their infighting to maybe try to get along with various differing opinions?
Yeah, it's very easy. Listen to your mother. So in this case, listen to Mitch McConnell, listen to President Trump. We got to get this thing done. It's very clear. I mean, part of this is that sometimes you have to give things up and you have to compromise, and that's part of the deal. And I think that that's a big lesson that you learn when there's 5 children involved.
Mine is also for you, Mercedes. We were talking in the break, and this is my proposal for Iran, and I want to know your take on it. Don't give them any sanctions, pull that off the table, and let them know on the front end, this deal is coming apart at the seams. We are rescinding the Iran deal in its entirety.
Yes.
How about playing it that way?
I think that's a smart move. I do think that the goal of the administration is to withdraw from the Iranian nuclear deal. I think that's really the only viable option that we have in order to stop Iran from developing the nuclear technology. Hopefully they can convince these other countries to join along.
Awesome. My comment is to David. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but this is a real thing. Did you know that right now there's currently a tropical storm, Don, which is expected to turn into a hurricane, true story, and a tropical depression named Hillary. That's going to I mean, what are the odds of that? And that wasn't done on purpose. That was done years in advance, these names.
The heightened awareness on politics has never been higher, and it includes even our weather forecasting.
How appropriate is that Hillary's a tropical depression? I have no idea.
She might be depressed right now. That's not fair, Eric.
All right. All right. Well, thank you to our Fox News specialists today, Mercedes Schlapp and David Avella. And we thank you all for watching. Make sure to follow us on social media at Specialist FNC on Twitter and Facebook. Remember, 5 o'clock will never be the same. Special Report is next, and it's so good, so keep watching.
Senate Republicans waved the white flag on Obamacare repeal and replace. President Trump says, let Obamacare fail. So where do congressional Republicans and the president go from here if they can't get consensus on just repealing Obamacare? This is Special Report.